Welcome. You're tuned in to the We Are All Artists podcast, a space where we talk about living life as a conscious creative. I'm your host, Adriana Douglas. Our intention is to support you throughout the process of discovering your inner artist and transforming from the inside out. Here in this space, we believe that the way out is through. On the other side is a world with more art, more beauty, and access to more of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. And now let's begin. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another interview episode of the We Are All Artists podcast. Today, I have friend and mentor Amanda Beatty on the show. She's a self-love and embodiment coach, host of the Dear Diary podcast, breathwork facilitator, a 4/6 Manny Gen in human design, and an instructor in Perfectly Balanced Co. Amanda helps women get out of their head and into their bodies with a variety of tools that include coaching, somatic healing, and breathwork. Her life's journey has taught her incredible ways to take experiences and find the value and wisdom from them. She's a huge self-care advocate and practices what she preaches, with daily meditations, thousands of pages written in her journal, and many of these tools are shared over on the podcast. One of her superpowers is her ability to lovingly support you to step into the most empowered and confident version of you. In today's conversation, her and I give you a glimpse into some of the things that we've been talking about offline, like what it's like to be in a phase of integration, what that means, how can you create space in your life, and where can you clear up what we call leaky energy, just places where you might not even realize that your energy's been going or where you'd like to reclaim your energy in order to feel more aligned and more centered. Another thing that we dive into is meeting your inner child and healing some of those layers as your adult self, which is such a journey, as I'm sure many of you can attest to. I can't wait for you all to hear this interview. Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for being on the We Are All Artists podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to continue our conversation. We had a lovely conversation on the Dear Diary podcast. What was it, last week? 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago. Yeah, that was a good, juicy conversation.
Yeah. So if anybody is curious to kind of hear a longer story of how we met, what we've been up to, definitely go check it out. It should be out soon. Or if not, it might already be out, depending on when you're listening to this. But it's a great conversation. And this is definitely, we'll take a spin down some different paths on this one, but I'm sure there'll be parallels and also just kind of 2.0. So check that out. But Amanda, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad that we can jam and kind of open up the conversations that we have offline.
Yes.
To the people listening. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're up to in your world and dive in from there.
Oh my gosh. What am I up to in my world as a Manny Gen in human design? I'm where do I start? So what am I up to in my world? I am in a space of integration, of sort of, I don't know, we're wrapping up the end of this year. It's October now while we're recording this. And this year was a lot of lessons, a lot of struggles, a lot of wisdom. And so I feel what do you do when you're in that space, right? I feel sometimes we don't stop long enough to celebrate our wins and really get clarity on what the wisdom is that we're learning. And why did I experience that? And why was that so hard for me? And what patterns am I still getting tripped up on? So I'm in this integration phase, which feels difficult and also really empowering to sort of zoom out and look at my life thus far and see how far I've come and see where I'm going and what gets to leave and what gets to stay, what's working, what's not. So yeah, that sort of feels like the energy that I'm in right now.
I love that. The integration piece sometimes I feel is not talked about enough and not really given maybe as much credit as it could, because we're constantly running to the next thing to heal sometimes in this space. And the next pattern, like what you're saying, like what patterns am I still getting tripped up on? Like I'm the same way. I'm like, okay, there's this pattern and this one and this one. And like, how am I going to tackle it next? And like, what course is going to like get me to like do the thing and overcome it and like integrate and like, I will release it. So the integration has been nice because taking the time to stop and take note, it's like a different energy to kind of slow down, take note, reflect, instead of like joining another program just to like heal the pattern. And like, that's like a great way to approach it in some ways as well. It's just like, we're just talking about different energy right now, right? This like, idea pausing.
Yeah. I think sometimes we get into this pattern of like looking for the secret sauce, looking for the magic key, looking for the missing puzzle piece. And we forget that it's within us already. You know, I mean, yeah, there are different ways and different mentors and different programs and different, you know, coaching styles that you can learn new things. You know, it's like they say you hear the same thing 100 times, but it's like on that 101st time, you're like, oh my God, I got it. It landed. And so it's definitely that energy too of like, I've heard this all before and now I get to really sit with it and be with it. And obviously still receiving support through it because I think that support is literally everything. But yeah, I do. I think we don't talk about integration enough. And it's such a huge part of it. It's that the energy of like forever a student, kind of like it's like reminiscent of that. And you don't have to always keep seeking for your healing or the ahas or the clarity. Like sometimes it is just already within you. Just got to sit still long enough to listen.
Exactly. It's the sitting still part. It's like, it's okay. So I love what's coming up right now. The forever a student energy. It's like, how can I be in the forever a student energy, yet like in certain phases of life, not be like needing the next breakthrough, but still be forever a student? Like, how can I be a student and still not be like actively necessarily like learning new stuff? Like, how can I just process whatever is coming up? And like you were saying, like, it takes sometimes like so long for things to land. Like you hear it over and over and over again. I think that's partly probably why for some of my journey, at least, like I just kept taking courses because it was like more things would land, things that didn't land before, like they just landed differently. But it's like the other thing that I heard you say was like, it's like, what patterns am I still getting tripped up on? So it kind of this integration piece allows you to see what has like kind of fallen away and like what's still really active. So it's more like being a student with yourself versus during an integration period versus like someone else giving you more info. But I agree, support during it is still important. It's a lot to unpack.
It is. It is. Well, yeah, support. I mean, support is everything because even just like to soundboard my experience or like what I'm going through, sometimes just even in that, I can receive the clarity that I need. But there is an aspect of taking everything that you've experienced externally, internally. What did you learn from it? Like, what are the takeaways? What are the pieces of wisdom within your experiences? And then what do you do with it? You know, it's like, it can just be this information that's floating around within the ether or in your head or whatever. Or do you take it and utilize it and like embody what you've learned and allow it to land deeper within you so that you can harness it the next time you go through an experience that feels similar or you get triggered or whatever, what have you. I feel like I did that a lot when we were on lockdown during COVID. I feel like I learned a lot about myself and then I just sort of like ignored it after we sort of opened up the world and everything. It was like, okay, thank God that's done with. And it was like, no. So I've actually been revisiting pieces of that too. And that was years ago. So it's like, yeah, sometimes we do just have to sort of slow down and zoom out at like, where is the wisdom here? And how can I really harness it to become the best version of myself in the process?
What you were just saying about lockdown and like kind of revisiting some info, something that a mentor once shared with me, which at the time and still today was like really valuable for me. Like it was something along the lines of like, if you don't have the answer yet, like you don't need to know yet. And so like,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because a lot of these things like we're saying like have taken in some time and sometimes like immediate, but sometimes like years to like actually kind of you let it in, like it comes in and you're like, oh, whereas like if you're in that like need to know energy, like I need to know it now, which I find myself there a lot because I'm very impatient about that. I'm like,
Same.
what's the lesson? I'm like, I need to know it right now. But it doesn't work that way because you have to like live the lesson.
Yeah.
That's something that I was kind of like not getting in the beginning. I was like, if I just like learn about it, like I don't have to like go through it, but like you live it by going through it. It's like
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think this year for me personally was one of the most challenging years of my life. So it was like this year, as opposed to any other year, I was like, okay, we really need to like see what's here for us because I don't want to relive a lot of that again. So like, let's really see if we can find where we need to improve, what works, what's not working, and where I get to. And I also think too, when you can sort of zoom out and look at the bigger picture of what you've experienced and where the patterns are and where you've shown up as your highest self and where maybe you did not. There's also a level in, and I know we talk about this often, there's a level of creating space in your body, in your mind, in your soul, in your, environment of like, okay, that stuff that I went through, like we're done with that now. I'm no longer choosing to react to conversations, to people. Like we're done with that. And so that opens up a ton of space too, so that I can step into the version of me that feels more at peace and ease and like, can relax a little more.
I love that. The creating the space and something that we've been chatting through together, embodied wisdom, is the just like, where are you leaking the energy? So you just talked about having like a really difficult year this year. And kind of what I'm hearing from you is that like you were really looking at your energy and like, where was it leaking? Where were you like super firm? And like, where were you in between maybe? So like, I would love to hear about that. Maybe you could explain to the audience, like kind of what it even means to feel like you have leaky energy, like kind of conceptually, and what that process looked like for you.
Sure, absolutely. So, well, I'll start at the very beginning. Embodied wisdom was this aha that I had while I was meditating someday of like, I really wanted to create this intimate little container and walk women through this exact process that I'm doing. I'm like live in the flesh, in the arena with you, like doing the work with you. And I thought that that was really powerful. And it's like, I think in that, the first thing that sort of came, and we're just like, I'm flying by my seat of my pants with this experience, this journey. And I'm like, oh, I have to do this every year at the end of the year. Like, this is big. And so this is like my trial run. And I'm trying to navigate and think about like, okay, what's really needed here? Like, we zoomed out, we looked at our year, we set our intentions for the remainder of the year. What do we desire? How do we want to show up? What do we want to let go of? And like the one thing that just kept coming up over and over and over again is like making space. And how do we make space in our life for more of the good? Well, we got to get rid of some of the yuck. And in that, it's like, okay, how do I do that? And a while back, I was in a program and the woman talked about sealing leaky energy tabs. And I was like, is that like the meme where you talk about like a woman's mind is like 150 different Google tabs open and there's music playing in the background and you don't know where it's coming from? Like, it's that energy of like, if I have my energy open, extended, like vulnerable to people and projects and creations and commitments, and like I'm just overcommitted and like undernourished, then that's a problem. That's a problem because I'm committing to too many things. I'm reacting. I end up reacting to all of these things. I end up giving away my power to these things. They're just taking up space in my mind. And how do we clear it up? Well, first we got to get clear on like what exactly is leaking into our energy. You know, what situations are we attaching ourselves to where we could just set a boundary and just have the space to just walk away, you know? So there's so many different ways in which we all have leaky energy, whether we're people pleasers or we overcommit and we're committing to things that are actually really a no for us. So yeah, I just give you a quick example. This morning before this interview, I was craving this French pastry and I've been craving it for weeks now. And I was like, I keep thinking about it. This is leaky energy. I mean, it's a very silly example, very surface level, but it's a perfect example. Like I kept thinking about this pastry and like, oh, it looks so good. I wanted it. Like I wanted to honor myself, but I had to drive out of my way. And should I go? Should I not? I don't have the time. Oh, that's really frivolous to go that far out of your way to all of the excuses. But it just kept coming up and coming up. And it's like, oh my gosh, go get the pastry. What are you nuts? Like, and I did. And it was like that first bite was like, okay, space. We got it. Like that's not taking up space in my mind anymore. So it is a silly example, but that's what I mean.
I love it,
yeah.
I love it. I love it. And as you're saying that, I'm like, I am the offender that has 23 tabs open on my phone on Safari. I cannot stop. Like, I'm better about it on the computer now to be like, let me like maybe turn my computer off every now. Like, it's like, how often do we turn the computer off? I'm always like, so I'm with you on that. And the tabs being open in our brain, like even like the pastry example is perfect because that's like something you want to do, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so imagine if like something that you want to do is taking up kind of like that leaky energy space, like all the stuff you don't want to do is like heavy baggage in a way.
Yeah.
Like I find myself for sure, even sometimes with tasks that I don't like as much, like it'll make me leak because I'll just be like, I don't want to do them, but then I'll just constantly be thinking about them. Like I have to do these things I don't want to do. And it's just like, if you had just spent the 20 minutes doing it, like you wouldn't be here. And that's like probably a different conversation in of itself. But it's important to note that like the good and the quote unquote bad, like leaky energy is leaky energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many different, whether it's organizing your house or decluttering your house or setting boundaries with your partner or your children, honoring your yeses and your nos, setting aside like uncommitted, devoted, like non-negotiable time to dedicate to your self-care and your rituals and routines and practices. Like when you really want to do that thing, like for example, meditating, like I'm like, I want to get up every morning and I want to meditate for an hour. And when I don't, because I choose to sleep in, sometimes that's okay. And then other times I'm like thinking about it all day. Like you better do it tomorrow. You should have done it today. Like, that this is beneficial for you. That you feel good. And it's like, yes, there's a little bit of that like shamey energy there, but it's also this like drain. It's taking up too much of my space. Whereas if I just get up early, and now I have been for the last couple of weeks, I feel so good. Like I know that that's good for me. So I need to just do it and honor that so that I'm not dwelling in the, you should have.
I think too, like when setting up like the things that will make you feel good, right? Because I think one of the things that we've been chatting on is like celebrating our wins and like, how do we feel good? And like, it's so interesting to me. That's a space that like, at least for me, and I think many of us, like we can sort of sometimes gravitate toward like what's not going right. But like the celebrating the wins, like kind of changes your energy and into creating and cultivating like a more spacious space, right?
Yeah, you talked about it, I don't remember exactly what you said, but like, we're always busy moving on to the next and on the next and on the next thing. And it's like, actually, what if you were to slow down just a little bit more and acknowledge how far you've come, I saw a quote a couple of weeks ago and it said, the past version of me is so proud of the present version of me because she used to get tripped up on that. And it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I can think of so many examples where I used to get really tripped up on, maybe it's a conversation with my partner and normally I'd get really reactive and attached to his opinions or his projections or just like whatever. And like that took up a lot of space inside of me. And it's like sitting with it, integrating it, realizing where I'm giving my power away, when I'm reacting, like what is the pattern, and just being with a different version of myself moving through that, like a more empowered version of myself of like, we know better than that. Like, we've learned this already. Like, when is this pattern going to be done with? And then being finally done with it. And then you can look back and go, oh my gosh, now when this thing happens, when this conversation happens, I'm grounded, I'm present, I'm in my power, I'm not reacting, And to zoom out and look at that and go, oh my God, there's growth right there. Boom. There is where I learned something, I integrated it, and then I embodied the version of me who no longer gets tripped up over whatever that thing is. And that in itself creates so much space for you to, be your highest self and be in the frequency of like your true essence, not the version of you that's walking around triggered whenever your partner and you have conversations.
I love that. And what it reminds me of is like embodied wisdom, right? Which is the program and container that you are actively running at this time. And like the example you just gave about like really in some of these more day-to-day moments, whether it's with your partner at work, like that you stop and you make a different choice. Like to me, that is like super representative to me of like the creative journey is like making one choice after one choice after one choice that like ultimately leads you to like the path that you desire. And the thing that I found interesting this year, because I actually would like in my journal this year, I would write down like every few months, like what I felt were wins. And what I noticed this year versus other years where like the wins were like, 10, go for a walk, like with just my own thoughts. Like that was a win for me. It wasn't like the insane goals that I set every single year. It was like those little things, but those little things then made the goals like that I set like easier to achieve. So it's like, you think it's the goal, but it's actually like these small everyday moments that then you're like, wow, like I did that. Like I walked with my own thoughts looking at nature. Like that was hard for me. But that was the fulfilling goal versus like launching this podcast. Like, don't get me wrong. That's also an amazing goal. And that's also, but it's like a testament to like cleaning up the energy. Like if I hadn't cleaned up the energy and like really like taken time to integrate, learn lessons, whatever, like it's much harder to get to the big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Along the way of making space and integrating the lessons and really embodying the wisdom of who you desire to be. It's the quote, like you become who you're meant to be along the way. It's the journey. It's not the end result or the other side of the bridge or the top of the mountain. As soon as you get to the top of the mountain peak, you look and there's 50 other mountains that you need to climb, So, but it's like, who did you become in the process of getting up at this mountain? And yeah, this would still be like an idea in your journal if you didn't make the space and make the decision to really put yourself out there and lean into an edge and do it. Yeah.
I think something that also, as we've been talking, I've been thinking about in terms of like cleaning up the energy, like celebrating, recognizing patterns, like recognizing when you're in something. That's also really important. But something that I learned, and I think this was from Mark Groves and Create the Love. I think it's from one of his courses. It was like, where are you being like the red flag or like the green flag? Like, and I thought it was like fascinating. So that's something that as we've been talking about it, I was like, this is kind of along the lines of like being the green flag. Like, where are you acting something that you'd be like, that's a red flag. Where are you being I don't know why I just thought of it, but it reminded me of that, what we've been talking about. And that was something that I also was like, my mind was blown. When that question was dropped in one of those courses, I was like, oh my God, where am I being the red flag? Like, you really have to stop and be like, okay, it's me. Like, where am I holding myself back? Where am I in my own way? Where am I blocking myself from moving forward on the journey?
Yeah. And it's funny too, because we all have our thing, right? Like our one thing, couple of things where it just, maybe we feel like we're forever going to need to like get over. And it's not that we ever truly maybe we do. I don't know. Truly get over whatever this thing is, but it's the onion layers, right? You shed it one aha at a time, one, breathwork practice at a time. Like I'm big into embodiment practices and breathwork practices. And it's like layer by layer, you come back to, you strip away the filter, the muck, the yuck, the patterns, and your true essence is not a red flag. You know, you're fully embodied in your power and your purpose, and you feel inspired and it's effortless and you're like all of that, everything that you desire, like that's your true essence. The red flag energy is just where you're giving your power away and where you're reacting and where you're succumbing to or allowing your inner child to throw her temper tantrum, is what I always say.
That's such a good point. Like, such a good point. It's like, there's like that Burning Man image of like the two humans and then they have like their inner childs inside. Have you ever seen it?
Yes. Yeah.
That is like what I'm thinking of right now of like, and it was so confusing, I think, as a concept for me in the beginning. Actually, maybe I'll ask you to explain it a little bit. The concept of that it wasn't like me, in air quotes, running the show. Like there was like an inner child that was like quite possibly in different life scenarios, like coming out to play. I would love maybe if you could like chat about that for a second of like how when we show up, we just need to be cognizant that like there's a whole person here and there's also all of our programming, whether you say it's societal, ancestral, childhood, but that like, that it's like, yes, it's you, but like there's sometimes these things that maybe we haven't looked at or that are happening. And you might even be like, sometimes like in the middle of a conflict or an argument, like at least for me, sometimes I walk away and I'm like, why did I say that? Or like, why did I do that? Like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like what you're saying, like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, this is like, not even like, I don't like this energy. It feels gross. So like, maybe just like, I'll kick it over to you for some thoughts on that.
So doing inner child work has been an experience for anybody who's done it, you know, inner child work, shadow work, any of that. I remember it being explained to me. I don't even remember who. I guess it might have been Stevie, the woman that we met in Embodied Women, explaining it to me as a time when your younger self, when his or her needs were not met. And in that moment, you experience either, you know, unworthiness or shame or whatever the thing is, because your needs weren't being met. And that, how you react from that experience, how you cope with that experience, whether it's big T trauma, little T trauma, whatever the case is, just anytime your needs weren't met, it gets stuck and frozen inside of you. And that's like that little pocket, that little frozen pocket of fear or shame or sadness or unworthiness. It sticks with you. And each layer, like I just spoke about, like the onion layers, each time you revisit these scenarios from your adult self, from a different lens, from your higher self, a more empowered self, each time you revisit these moments that you experienced, whatever it was when you were a child, it starts to sort of thaw out those past experiences, because you know, with whether it's self-awareness, compassion, receiving support, whatever tool it is that you're using to go back to your inner child, you can fully be present with the little girl or boy inside of you that experienced whatever it was. And I'll give you a quick example. I was on a coaching call one time and we were talking about my partner and I, and like me reacting and feeling shamed and blamed and judged. And like, that was a really, really big trigger for me. And so we were sort of like dissecting of like, okay, well, when was the first time that you felt like shamed, blamed, or wrong, you know? And instantly it was a scenario when I was 6 years old that would play over and over and over again in my head. And I didn't know why I kept replaying it, but I did. And I was homesick. I had the chicken pox. I was in kindergarten or whatever. I don't know what grade I was in. And I stayed home. And I remember playing Candyland with my mom. And she was probably, looking back in hindsight as my adult self, she probably was annoyed because she had to take off of work, right? She was home with a sick child. I was probably whiny and uncomfortable because I was itchy. She might have been worried about getting chicken pox. Like whatever the case is, I remember her, I was frustrated, I was sad. And she had said to me, like in a moment of frustration, like, God, why can't you just be like your other friends who are home with their kids, probably having a great time? And here you are miserable. And I just, in that moment, I shrunk. Like my little girl just shrunk. She felt bad. She felt wrong. And I don't even remember what happened after that. But I just remember, like, from a somatic level, my body just contracted. Like, I just felt shamed. And so during the coaching session, we revisited that moment. I stepped in as my adult self and I came to her aid and I gave her a hug and I let her know, you didn't do anything wrong and it's okay to be uncomfortable and you're not bad and wrong and you don't need to be like them. And she said, no, what do you want to do next? Would it be okay if you took her out of this home? And I was like, oh my God, yeah. So I did. I took my little girl's hand, and we left my childhood home and I brought her to this field with wildflowers and she was happy. And it was like that scenario never entered my mind again. Am I still dealing with that lingering pattern of shame and blame? Sure, different layers of it. But that was a huge layer that I thawed out doing inner child work.
Thank you for sharing that. I love hearing about the layers and like just like the ability that we have to like go back and heal the past like from the present. And also knowing that like, yeah, like let's go back to let's talk about the layers for a second, because that was definitely like a misconception I think I had in the beginning, was like, it's like one and done. Like, it's like I visited, like I would like using the example you gave, if that were like something I had experienced, I'd have been like, okay, I visited the example. This feeling is now complete. It's like, yes, that feeling is complete from that moment in time, but all the other associations and things that are tied into that feeling, like it's, you slowly but surely like uncover the next layer and free yourself up a little bit more. And that goes back to like the beginning of our conversation with creating space. Like I bet when you experienced that in your session, that you created more space inside. You felt more spacious.
Oh my gosh, totally. You create space for your true essence. And my true essence doesn't feel shamed or blamed or guilty. Like none of that belongs to me. Which is
like also an amazing thing. Once you realize that and integrate that, where you're like, actually, none of that's me, like inside, like the soul essence, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's where I came to the conclusion of, oh, actually, now I have the space to look back and be super self-aware of, oh my gosh, you probably were being like a typical kid, miserable, whiny, itchy. And she probably had to take off work. Maybe she didn't have any sick days. Maybe she lost a day's pay. Maybe, what if, instead of what ifing that I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm not like my other peers, I'm a lot to deal with. And like, instead of all of those what ifs, it was like, oh, actually, no. So yeah, it created so much space for me to look at it from a zoomed out perspective and not attach myself to the situation and make myself bad and wrong, which was in the way of looking at layers. That was a really thick layer, but no one and done. Like I wish.
I know.
And
I know. And what you were just saying, like that is something that really is new for me, but like releasing your parents from that. Cause like exactly what you're just explaining, like it's like we can hold so much emotion for our experiences with our parents, and they were just doing the best that they knew with what they were given. And like for me, like it's so much easier said than done. If you had said that to me 3 years ago, I would have been like sure. But just to have the compassion, exactly what you're saying. Maybe they had a lot of bills to pay. Maybe they didn't get paid by somebody immediately. Maybe their parents never gave them the tools to support them in the way that now you're supporting yourself. So it kind of goes into the layers, but also like the generations, the way that now I'm sure that you're taking forward, like in your parenting, right? Based off of all the things you've learned and all the things that you're like, I want this to end with me. Like, I don't want my son to experience XYZ.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot. Inner child work was super triggering for me because at the same time I was going back with my inner child, and then in the underneath layer of that was like, oh, and you're a mom and you have this 7-year-old. The duality of both, of like comforting and having compassion for my inner child, and then not shaming myself and having compassion for my adult self, looking at, oh, what are you doing to him that you might not be realizing? Like I'm sure she didn't realize that sentence that she uttered was going to stick with me for my entire adult life, No way she would have said that, right?
No way.
So it's like, oh my gosh, what have I said to him that he's going to, at 35 years old, be like, well, mom, that one time, like, so yeah, inner child work is a trip. And it really takes a lot of compassion to sort of go through and unravel and reparent ourselves, unravel some of the baggage, some of the heaviness, and reparent ourselves from our adult selves, who know better. Even if we don't realize we know better, we do.
Yeah. It's like reparenting is something that the world would be like a much more loving place if we all were able to reparent and come from that higher perspective, and more open to releasing a lot of our experiences from times past, whether it was with your parents or with somebody else. So I love that. And thank you for sharing your stories.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I would love to know where people can find you, how they can work with you at the moment, what you're feeling inspired by to share about your work.
Sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh. This healing journey inspires my work. Everything that I'm living, that I'm growing through, that I'm moving through, I'm pretty authentic and raw about how I'm moving through it, what tools I'm using. I dub myself the self-love guru, hence Dear Diary, the self-love podcast. But I really feel like it's important for me to share my experiences so that people don't think that they're alone in this. We're all in this journey if you're on the journey, and we're all doing the work, and we're all sometimes feeling like we're stuck in the mud. And having tools and a support system and community has been everything. So I hang out mostly on Instagram. Everything that is linked in my bio, you can work with me. I have free tools. I have a newsletter, a weekly newsletter called Love Notes. And it's been something I've been so excited about. I just share my current experiences, how I'm moving through, what I'm moving through, the tools that I use, because I feel like it's something that I have needed and haven't really found. Just like weekly reminders and invitations to check in and love yourself more and all of that good stuff. And yeah, so that's where you can find me. That's the link for all of my stuff. I have one-on-one offers, group offers. Like I'm doing all the things because this work is like, once I found it, I was like, oh my God, it found me. And it was like this sigh of relief of like, this is what I meant to do. I felt so lost. I felt so like, life has got to be better than this. But it was because I was holding on to so much heaviness. And once I found coaching and somatic healing and breath work and like all of these tools, I'm like, oh, it is better than this. So now it's just my mission to share that with the world.
Thank you. So I love the newsletter. I get it. And it's like every week, I think. And
yeah,
you drop so many resources in there. And I feel like you have some offerings that are also like for people that are new to your work. I feel like you do some sessions that are like, there's a self-love session, I think. And a breathwork session. Tell me if those are for everyone or people.
Those are for everyone. Once a month, I host a somatic self-love session and a breathwork workshop. So both of them I do monthly. And they're $10 drop-in fees. And yeah, I open it up to my community. And it's just a really great way to tap in, to get out of your head, into your body, to see what's going on inside of you, either through your breath or just through your presence and your awareness. Somatic healing and breathwork have been like the most powerful tools for me. And so I really wanted a tangible, cheap way for people affordable way for people to get access to these experiences. Because I mean, one session has the power to change everything, unlock a huge layer. And, that's everything.
And to your point of seeking support, like for those listening, like it's so important, at least in my experience, like, yeah, to go through this with the support of somebody. So with Amanda guiding you through an hour-long session, whether it's breath work, a self-love session, like you've got the support, which kind of allows you to like relax into it, like in a way, like whatever is coming up and just be there. And what we were talking about this whole conversation, like sitting with the pattern, sitting with the lesson, like sitting with the wisdom to like let it inspire you into your next course of action, right? Like that's kind of, these sessions allow you to release and to just as we embody the wisdom. Well,
yeah.
just like your course, full circle.
Yeah, full circle. Yeah, that's embodying the wisdom of what you've learned so that you can become your best self, the self that feels all the things that you want to feel. It's everything. And I think it's something that it's like the one thing we all have in common. We all want to experience more love, more wealth, more freedom, more success. And the way in which we do that is by letting go of anything that's not that, moving away from anything that's not that and moving towards that, creating space so that we can move towards that.
I love it. I think that's a perfect ending for today. So I will link all of Amanda's details in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to continue on the embodied wisdom journey with you. And
yes. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And one more thing before you go. I wanted to let you in on something that I'm offering soon. The Artist's Way is the book that really kicked off this journey for me, and I'd like to pay it forward by facilitating a creative cluster once per year. This is a 12-week process that is intended to teach people to process and transform life through acts of creativity. I wish I would have had a group to go on this journey with when I did the book, and I would love for you to join me. Winter is the perfect time to go inward and reflect. There will be maximum 4 spots in order to keep it intimate. We start January 15th. For more information and application, please DM me on Instagram. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you learned something new and embrace being the student of your own life until the time we meet again. If you'd like a way to support the show and to hear more of this content, it means so much to me for you to take a few minutes out of your day to leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd love to stay connected with you on Instagram or TikTok at Adriana Goes Creative. You can find me and hit follow while you're feeling inspired right after listening to the show. I can't wait to get a DM from you hearing what you loved about it and what you desire to hear more of. I appreciate each and every one of you so much. I'll talk to you soon. This podcast is for entertainment and general informational purposes only. I am not a licensed healthcare professional, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician or other qualified professional.